There undoubtedly will have been a few people who, after watching my review of the ID4, thought, you know what, electrification is fun and all, but I'd like something more imposing, something more majestic, something more enormous. And I'd like to spend roughly double of what the ID4 costs on it. Well, good news, because today we have just the car for you. And it's the Touareg. And it's not any Touareg, it's the R, the most powerful desert dweller yet. Which is interesting if you think about its evolution. The first generation was available with a 6-litre W12 developing 450 horsepower and 600 Newton meters of torque. Or if you preferred your tanker you'd be inevitably towing to be brimmed with diesel instead, you could have an R50. That one had a 5-litre V10 with 351 horsepower and a whopping 850 Newton meters of torque. By the time the second generation was on the horizon, VW had lost all of their humour. You shall not have more than 8 cylinders and 4.2 litres of displacement. It was also the first time a hybrid was available, a 3-litre petrol V6, which incidentally was the most powerful variant of that time. Which brings us to generation number 3. Yet more cylinders had to be chased out of the engine base. Now it's V6s everywhere. Apparently some markets get a V8 diesel, but certainly not Switzerland. But even with half the cylinders of the original W12, this manages to be the most powerful Touareg ever. The result of all that technology is 2.5 tons of magnificence, with an equally magnificent 122,000 Swiss francs for this very car. On the upside, it's probably the most affordable of the MLB Evo cars, the platform on which Touareg, Q7 and Q8, Cayenne, Bentayga and Urus sit. Now, there is a problem. I am a simple man with a simple mind. I look at the car's tires and that tells me how I am supposed to test it. So if it comes on eco tires or regular performance tires, I settle into a transient state of mind in which I am driving while actually rejecting the notion of driving. I thought it would be the same with the Touareg, but it isn't. Because this massive SUV rides on equally massive 22-inch Continental Sport Contact 6s, which is a serious tire. So when I look at the Touareg, what my brain actually sees is this. I obviously know this isn't the Civic Type R, because I never needed the stepladder to get into that one. But then it also doesn't handle anything like a Civic Type R. But it is quite composed, especially in sport mode. But I do not want to talk about this car's handling capabilities. I would like to talk about the interior. And it doesn't look like anything I have ever seen in a VW. But also in general, because the cars I usually drive have as many luxuries as, well, as an air-conditioned prison cell. But this is different. Everything is covered in fine leather, the seats are heated and cooled, and they massage you. And it's like 2 hands massaging you. No, it's like the human equivalent of a spider massaging you. Well, okay, I'm not sure that's something you want. But it looks really comfortable in here, and given how wide the center console is, I think this classifies as furniture. So this is not a passenger cabin, this is a sitting room. I think even the rear passengers would agree, because they have their own heated seats and their own climate controls. Let's talk about ride comfort, and there is comfort in comfort. Usually on this road, when I drive my own cars, I need to keep my mouth open, because otherwise my teeth would be shaken out. But in this one, I just glide over bumps due to the air suspension, which is an optional extra, and at 2,000 Swiss francs, not a cheap one. But that might be an investment that you want to make, because let's be honest, you buy an SUV to tower above all people. But the problem is, these days everybody else has got a crossover and an SUV. So you crank up the ride height and once again look down on other people. Or you could use it for some off-roading. Another thing that is different to other VWs is the gearbox. This is not VW's DSG, it is ZF's 8-speed automatic. And again, that is due to the platform, which has to deal with bigger and heavier cars and more powerful cars with lots of more torque. It is a very good gearbox, and especially in these daily driving, relaxed situations, it has no trouble at all producing an adequate gear. But then there's so much torque, even if it would miss a gear, I'm not sure you'd notice. And then maybe you would not want to linger around in sport mode for too long, just to try to get it out of its comfort zone. Or you could shift yourself, but that is not very satisfying with an automatic gearbox usually. And the pedals are plasticky and rather small, and probably in a heavy SUV would you really want to shift yourself? But you'd have the option. Or you could ignore the gearbox completely, because by default the car starts up in EV mode. And according to VW, you should be able to get 45 kilometers of electric only range, which is not bad, I reckon, and would probably be sufficient to cover most of your daily use. And then in the evening you'd plug in again at home and have a full charge the next morning. I am the first one to shed a tear for the hilarious W12 and the V10. But if even Lamborghini and Porsche cannot sell V10s and V12s, how would VW manage to do that? So as much as it pains me to say, the hybrid was probably the only way this would work. And on the outside, it definitely looks the part. People turn their heads, although that might be down to the color scheme or maybe driven by their hatred for SUVs. But then this is really a big car, and Zurich is a tiny city with tiny parking bays. What do I think of the first big SUV on the channel? Well, it is not a driving distilled car. What a plot twist. Here is an actual surprise though. I sort of liked it. It looks cool in an "oh no, a drug dealer is here" way. The fact that it can run on electricity alone is alright in a big car like this. That and the spaceship interior make traveling at motorway speeds effortless, maybe even relaxing. But technically you don't need the R for that, because even though journalist drivel incoming, it handles surprisingly well for a car this size. It's not exactly a Lotus Elise. Now, these sports SUVs are stupid anyway, so if you want a Touareg, save yourself some money and get a model with a smaller engine. If you want a sports SUV, I suggest you save yourself even more money and make an appointment with your therapist instead. But if you still want one, there are plenty of smaller crossovers that are more engaging to drive. Just keep seeing the therapist.